Welcome to the second part of our lecture, the tokenization of everything. And in this part, I want to tell you more about the so-called design of a token. In the first step, I want to tell you what are special characteristics, what are special properties a token can have to be best fitted and designed for a specific use case. And before we dive into the design of a token, we take a step back and have a look at the last lecture. So we were talking about the concept of tokenization, described the really basics and fundamentals. We highlighted the role of distributed ledger technology to enable this kind of new concept, and we try to define the process of tokenization. In general, tokenization creates a token of literally anything. But here it is important to consider two additional aspects. The first one is the legal relationship that has to be established, and the second one would be the bearer that is assigned to that legal relationship and the object itself. And once we have the object, the legal relationship, and the bearer, we can contextualize the usage of a token for a specific use case. And if you missed the last lecture, I can recommend it to have a look at it. And now I'm looking forward to tell you more about the design of a token and its application. So where we can potentially represent any object on a distributed ledger, you can see that a token can also take on many different forms. And as you can see on the left, a token is mostly described through its function and its behavior. And as you can see here, we have, for instance, cryptocurrencies, where of course a currency is represented by a token. We have a security token, where financial instruments such as securities are tokenized. We have, for instance, stablecoins as a subgroup of so-called payment tokens, and of course some token which indicate their behavior in a certain way. This would be a non-fungible token, for instance, or a utility token. And the descriptions and the classifications, they're not still systemized at the moment. There are a lot of special frameworks on the internet and specific reports. And also the jurisdiction in different countries use different classifications to classify these kinds of different tokens. What is important here is that the token serves as a specific instrument to represent any object, and therefore it also somehow represents the behavior and the properties of such an object. And what we can do here, of course, we can represent a physical object as well as digital objects such as licenses or music files through a token. The important thing that the transactions are stored tamper resistant on a database, and we can also enhance the functionality of a token through additional smart contracts. So we can program the behavior once it's digitized. And this accelerates also somehow the convergence between the physical and the digital world. Just imagine the Internet of Things. And the idea is also that we can somehow represent or establish a digital twin through a token. And just important or to consider is that we have a lot of blockchain frameworks where we have so-called standardized token contracts. One example would be Ethereum, with its smart contract token. And on the other side, there are also a lot of frameworks which don't have this functionality whatsoever. There are also some certain workarounds, and therefore it is important just to keep in mind that not every framework can establish a specific token. And based on the idea of representing transaction of an object in form of a token, we can identify several benefits of using this technology. First of all, we have increased transparency, where we have a shared database accessed and used between different participants. We have a specific data integrity by design of the blockchain. This is due to the public and private key pair, and of course due to cryptography. Then we have increased liquidity of assets, because it allows us to create a token which can be also be divisible, tradable, and then we have, of course, this intermediation, as seen in the lecture before. The potential of making third parties obsolete is one opportunity. On the other, blockchain also provides new roles in form of miners or validators. Then we have a shared governance, because participants who want to access the platform or the marketplace, they have to agree on specific rules. And then we have automation, where we have a shared business logic in form of smart contracts. We can implement certain conditions after a transaction has been initiated. We can also execute the different processes. And then, of course, we have increased collaboration and cooperation between these participants in the network, which can be also seen as a new enabler for a new type of collaborative business models. And to better understand the different properties of a token, I want to give you a short introduction how it can be actually designed. And for that reason, we highlighted selected characteristics. For example, we have the functionality of a token. This would describe the role a token can take in a certain context. Is it active or is it passive? What about the supply? What about the token in circulation? They could be limited or unlimited. Is a token transferable to another person, or is the token assigned to a unique object? Is the token tradable on marketplaces? And of course, is it possible to have a fractional ownership of a specific token? And here it is important to keep in mind that these characteristics are dependent on the perspective. Of course, you have more technical properties which have to be considered. On the other side, there are also more business-oriented characteristics which are necessary to describe a certain use case. Now we have one of the most famous cryptocurrencies here to classify it. That would be the Bitcoin. And as you can see here, Bitcoin would take a passive role in the system. So it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. You can pay with it. The amount of Bitcoins is limited to 21 million Bitcoins in circulation someday in the future. The Bitcoin is transferable to another person, and it is uniform to ensure interchangeability on a marketplace, on an exchange. And the Bitcoin is also dividable. So you have the Satoshis, where you can have half Bitcoin or 1/3 Bitcoin. And this is, as you can see, characteristics similar to currency or payment. And this would be one example to take on a specific form of a token. And another example would be the tokenization of a car. And if you want to put this Porsche 911 onto the blockchain, we have to define its functionality. The functionality, it's passive, because we don't want to initiate specific services or processes with this car token. The supply is also limited, because the amount in the physical world of cars is also limited. It is transferable in case we want to buy or sell it on a specific marketplace. It is, of course, unique because it is a rare collectible old-timer. It is interchangeable because we want to trade it, and in case we want to give it to someone else, it is also divisible. As you can see here, we were talking about a specific token, and that would be a so-called investment token in this car or luxury good. Here you have to consider if we want to represent a car, for instance, for using this Porsche, the characteristics would be somehow different because especially the functionality would be shift from a passive to an active role. And the last example for our classification would be the tokenization of identity into an identity token. And if you consider the functionality, an identity token should play an active role in the system. An identity is mostly used to authenticate yourself for a specific service or for the initiation of a process, for a specific process. The supply of identity tokens would be limited to the amount of persons who are using it. The token would be not transferable, and it should be unique. It is not tradable on any marketplaces, and of course an identity would be not divisible. And yeah, a digital identity on a blockchain has been highly discussed, and this is for good reason, because the capabilities of a distributed ledger make absolute sense to tokenize, for instance, an identity and to use it into a broader context for so-called microservices. And especially the idea of using tokens for representing something individual or unique, this idea has already been implemented on the Ethereum blockchain. And therefore, I want to show you the example of Cryptokitties. Cryptokitties is a game similar to a trading card game where you collect cards. In this case, you have kittens which look differently. They have different fur, they have different eyes, and these kittens are represented by a non-fungible token, a very unique token. And the idea is that the properties of the blockchain and through distributed ledger technology, each cat is unique and cannot be replicated. And you can use these kittens now to mix them, and the characteristics of the parent kittens is passed on to offspring. And therefore you can build some kind of different generations of kittens. And the game has been very popular in the past, where a marketplace has been established where you can trade and sell your kittens. And there are also very rare kittens. For one example, you have the Genesis kitten. It's one of the very first Cryptokitties, one of the first generation kittens, and it's currently worth almost 100,000 Swiss francs. And yeah, that is somehow unimaginable. But the idea of using these unique tokens, I think, will become really important in the near future, especially if we have a look at the Internet of Things, where we want to establish a digital twin. And the functionality of such individual or unique tokens can be also combined with augmented reality. Yeah, let's say we have already digitized models, we have already digitized blueprints. We can assign this data to a unique token and can purchase it on a marketplace. And once we've bought this token, only then we are able to view this model. Yeah, because the system is designed, especially in that case, that you can't manipulate or you can't replicate this data so easily. And the token functionality of the distributed ledger or the blockchain offers a great potential to use this kind of data as a specific asset. And we can tokenize intellectual property, we can tokenize music or sound files. And I think that especially for these kind of goods, you can easily build up some kind of marketplaces for the tradability of such digitized assets. And in general, the opportunities for tokenization may seem endless. And what we try to do in the next step is to identify the most promising areas for the tokenization of objects. And what you can see here is a report conducted by McKinsey, where the level of digitization has been assessed throughout different industries. And in one specific column, they assessed the level of digitization for their specific asset stock. And as you can see here, you have sectors like the financial industry or advanced manufacturing, where the asset stock is already highly digitized. But you have also like industries, for instance, the transportation sector, you have mining, you have retail trade, healthcare and hospitality, where a big potential can be identified to tokenize these objects for digitization use cases. And this is really interesting because also in our fintech analysis, we can more or less identify certain use case areas for tokenization. Of course, one area would be the tokenization of existing assets like company shares, bonds, stocks. Then we have the tokenization of illiquid assets, for instance, real estate, cars, art, or metal materials and commodities. As a third part, we have the tokenization of usage rights. And then we have the tokenization of capital stocks in form of machineries, where we have really interesting use cases. And then we have the tokenization or the representation of currencies on a blockchain for the purpose of payment. And then another group is are collectibles, where we have specific luxury goods, which are more or less very illiquid, but the idea is to tokenize them to enhance tradability in form of tokens. And we already come to an end of our second lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any remarks or any comments, please leave me a note, and I'm looking forward to see you in the third lecture.